Hello and welcome to Mythical Entertainment Interviews. I'm your host, Mithrandiel. Today I'll be chatting with Clayton Rains, also known as Captain Flowers, about his experience as a shoutcaster for the House Party 5v5 League of Legends circuit. We'll discuss his recent YouTube video that went viral, as well as his thoughts on the growth of esports. Stay tuned.
Syndicate looking for this. The Clark's dead, but so is fully Noided. They've got to be careful about this one. If Athens is able to find that Gangplank ultimate in the middle of the pit, they might be in a whole lot of trouble. Chris Brown Senpai likely going to be killed here. The flash does not connect. He's going to be the first one to die. Calzarin in some trouble now, too. That's going to be a 2 for 0 going the way of Syndicate. A very tragic flash from Chris Brown Senpai could be the difference between Baron and not going over to their opponents. The Clark's trying to get in here as quickly as he can. Abson's still alive. He's got the Gangplank ultimate available. Gizma's doing everything he can to poke at these guys. GP ulti lands. Baron down to about a quarter of its health. Here comes the Clark. Here comes the potential cleanup. It's going to be Clark able to find Noided, able to find Thesis. Notorious, you're in trouble too. He's going to melt. Abson looking for even more damage. This is going to be the 3v5. Syndicate gets annihilated. Abson looking for the last one. That's Warriors showing up huge.
All right, well, Clayton, thanks very much for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us.
Absolutely. I appreciate the fact that you guys wanted to talk to me. I think it's going to be a fun interview.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your history with League of Legends. How did you get into the game, and from there, how did you get into casting?
Well, I got back into the game. This game released in the second half of 2009, and I started playing back when it first came out. I've got the UFO Corky skin and everything. And it was a thing that my friends had started playing. I had a couple of my friends. I was freshman in college at this point. So a couple of my friends that lived in the same dorm, they were like, hey, you got to check out this new game. This is a lot of fun. And so they got me into it. I started playing it, and I've been playing ever since. Obviously, you know, I've had a couple times where I've taken a break for a month or two, played different stuff and whatever, but I always come back to the game. The game always draws me back in. It's just been something I've been playing ever since it came out. I finished season 1 in the depths of bronze, like 1000 ELO. Not even kidding. I've seen the worst of it.
Yeah.
And then in season 4, I peaked at Diamond 2.
Wow.
So I've been all over the ELO spectrum, and it's been a blast. And getting into casting kind of ties into that second point I made about the bronze to diamond climb. In that when I was going from low rank to high rank, obviously that occurred over the course of a couple years.
Right.
Season 1 to season 4. And so by the time I was actually a high ranked player, it was my senior year of college, and I lived in a house with a lot of my friends. And I would, sit in my room and play solo queue in between classes and things. And my other friends that lived in the house with me would actually pull up a chair in my room and watch me play solo queue as I commented over it.
Okay.
And they would tell me, you should stream, man, or you should do some kind of thing related to League of Legends. But it was college internet. Ours was not very good.
Yeah,
so
right.
streaming was never really a possibility.
Yeah.
But all my friends kept saying, man, you got to try this. You got to try to do something along these lines. And eventually, after enough kind of egging on from my friends, just try it. Just see what you could do. I told him, I was like, I don't think I'm good enough to be an actual player streamer because Diamond 2 is not Challenger.
Yeah.
And at that point, I had fallen back to Diamond 4 thanks to the tilt of solo queue anyway. So I was like, but what about casting? Because that's something that they had mentioned before as well. I was like, you guys really think I could give that a shot? He said, yeah, man, go for it. And so I decided to just start casting over solo queue games. I downloaded Open Broadcaster software. I just casted a game by myself, watched a random game through the spectator client, and over time, I found I really enjoyed it. I started casting a couple games a day. Eventually, a couple months later, I uploaded my first cast to YouTube, and it's just evolved from there.
Awesome. Yeah, and so listening to your casting specifically, I've been very impressed. Physically, is there anything that you do to treat your throat or any exercise that you do to improve your diction in order to get at these rapid-fire play-by-play commentaries? I mean, it's incredible the stuff that you're doing right now.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, my friend. I actually make sure, the one thing I always make sure is I've got water nearby whenever I'm casting. If I don't have water nearby, it's going to be a problem because after those big explosive moments, you've got to take a drink for a second, recuperate. And then, of course, after I'm actually done casting for the day, I usually make sure that I drink something like warm tea or maybe eat a bowl of ice cream or just something soothing on your throat like that could actually help make sure that it's not going to undergo,
Strain,
any unnecessary wear and tear. Mm-hmm. And when you get to the question about exercises or things that I've done to improve diction or just general speaking ability, I haven't done anything specifically related to casting because I'm not actually too clued in as to the top exercises and things like that professional casters use. But while I was in college, I actually did spend a couple years on a college radio station where I learned, obviously, things about speaking in front of an audience, speaking on a microphone, on air, things like that. And I took theater for a couple years, which also included doing improvisational acting classes. And if there's one thing I can say, it's that improvisational acting courses are awesome if you're looking to get into something like this where you're broadcasting off of a script.
Right.
They help you so much. You're able to think quickly. You're able to make sure you're always saying something. And it really helps too with expanding that vocabulary, that diction element that you were talking about, making sure you're not just repeating the same words over and over and over again, right? Instead of just saying, Bard's going in, you can say Bard starts the fight, Bard going behind these guys, Bard initiating. You've got to find those synonymous phrases to really put that variety in there that gives you your cast that extra bit of spice.
Right. Now, you had a pretty popular video go up just about 2 weeks ago now. You were casting on a match between Syndicate and Wario's Warriors, and there was a massive turnaround at Baron that got you really riled up. Um, when you want to talk a little bit about what made that play so exciting for you?
I would absolutely love to talk about that because that was actually a question that I saw a lot in the comment sections of the Reddit thread and the YouTube video is the people who were not too impressed with the cast. And obviously you're going to have naysayers wherever you go. Even if you have a really solid approval rating, there's always going to be some people who aren't so happy with the content. And of course, as somebody who's looking to improve at what he's doing, as somebody who wants to get better, I really like to read those negative comments and see what people actually think needs to be improved the most. And one of the biggest things I saw people mentioning was, why are you so excited about this? Why is this guy going crazy, completely losing his mind over this nobody game, they called it? They were like, this isn't Faker versus Ryu, this isn't Worlds, why is this guy so excited?
Right.
But to me, it was super exciting because what this was the Swiss tournament for House Party 5v5, which is an organization that I cast for that does an amateur LCS circuit. And the Swiss tournament at the beginning of the season, any number of teams can sign up, 20 or 2,000, doesn't matter. The top 8 from that placement in that Swiss then move on to compete in the minor league in a weekly LCS style basis. So going into this tournament, we had a lot of teams. We had, I think, 30-something teams sign up for it. And there was one team that stood above and beyond the rest, Syndicate. These guys were clad in holy League of Legends armor that could not be penetrated. They had higher solo queue ranks than everybody else. Their macro play was impressive. Their team play was insane. The question wasn't, is Syndicate going to take first? The question was, will they lose a single game doing it? So everybody knew these guys were the Titans. These were the guys to take down. And so they go up against Wario's Warriors in like the third round or something. And Wario's Warriors is the definition of a middle-of-the-pack team. They had an all-star mid laner who was actually a master tier player. But the rest of the players were platinum, low diamond guys who were kind of the average skill level of what you were going to see competing in the tournament and in the subsequent weekly gauntlet. So this was kind of, gods versus men in terms of the matchup. And to everybody's surprise, as the laning phase goes on, Wario's Warriors is winning the laning phase. They find the 1v1 outplays, they find the 2v2 outplays, and they're making this game their own, building up these small leads early on. But then after we tick the 15-minute mark, after we tick the 20-minute mark, when we start to get into that rotational mid-game style play, Syndicate's clawing their way back. A pick leads to a turret, which leads to a rotation, which leads to another turret, and slowly but surely that lead that Wario's has is wearing away. And so what happens is you fast forward now 10 minutes into the future. We're at the 30-minute mark in the game, which is actually where the clip that made the front page of Reddit appears. Syndicate's looking for Baron. Now, obviously, if you're looking at the game, you could see the stats on the clip. It looked dead even at the top. Kills were close. Gold was close. People were like, why are you going so crazy? This is a really close game. It's not like it's last ditch, but it was last ditch.
Right. Yeah. This was their hill basically to die on.
Yeah, this was the stand. If Syndicate takes this Baron, they've had so much momentum for the past 15 minutes, they're just going to take everything not in the Wario's base and probably grab an inhibitor while they're at it. So if Wario's Warriors just lets them have this, yeah, they're not going to lose immediately, but over the course of the next 10 minutes, it's going to be a slow bleed, and these guys are done. So they decide to make their stand, and of course, as they go in to try to stop Syndicate, Syndicate, having that superior team play, picks off their jungler, picks off their support. So now they don't have Smite Steal, and they don't have Soraka heals to make the fight work out. It's looking like everything is over, and I'm thinking this game is over. Syndicate just won when they killed Soraka and Rek'Sai. And then you see in the clip, the Gangplank and the Ezreal, they're poking at Syndicate while they're in the pit. They're poking at him, doing whatever they can. Gangplank drops the ultimate, and as they're doing this, Ahri, who had respawned as this was starting, this is their master tier mid laner for Wario's Warriors, He makes his way into the fight, and these guys don't hesitate for even a second. They realize Baron's down to a quarter HP, and as soon as Ari's there, they pull the trigger and they go in. Ari blows up 2 immediately. The Lucian, the AD carry of Syndicate, normally their star carry, he's out of position in between Baron and Ari. He dies next, and the last 2 get run down. And the reason I completely lose my mind is because in that moment, that dream that Syndicate might actually drop a game in this entire tournament is still alive. And Wario's Warriors actually goes on to be the only loss Syndicate had, not only in the Swiss, but in the entire minor league afterwards.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for explicating that a bit. I think that shines a lot of light on that excitement, and yeah, definitely.
It was a crazy time.
It sounded like it, and that enthusiasm. I think, and it's funny you mentioned that. People are like, "Oh, this isn't Worlds. Why are you getting so excited?" And I think it's great to be excited about every game, because if you're the player in that game, every game is a big deal like that. Like imagine being the player, being Ari in that circumstance. Like you just turned that around. You're feeling that excitement, and I think part of it is the job of the caster is to communicate that excitement, why it's such a big deal.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter if it's a small game or if you're at Worlds. So a lot of people have made comparisons between the casting that you do and the casting that we typically see and hear in the LCS scene. In your opinion, what are some of the opportunities that you see when you watch pro casters? What are some things you're like, what, this could be done better, or or on the other side of that, what are some things that you really like about what you see on the procaster scene?
The procaster scene, one thing that I really think is awesome that these guys are able to do is you see them doing tri-casts more and more frequently these days, where you've got 3 guys all in the same cast working together. And that's something we don't do in the amateur scene, at least not at House Party 5v5, because it's very difficult to do when you're not actually there in person next to the people to read body signs and body language and signals and things like that to talk about who's going to talk next or whatever. But the coordination these guys have, listen to an LCS cast between multiple people, and listen to the fact that these guys never miss a beat, right? That's one thing that was a big lesson that I learned when I was doing radio in college, and that's the one thing they told me: dead air is the worst thing possible. You're either talking or you're playing music or you're playing some sort of a bit or something's happening. Don't leave dead air on. Watch the LCS cast with these tri-casts where you've got 3 people who've got to be coordinated as to who's talking when, so that you don't have dead air and you don't have people talking over each other, and they're doing it. It's beat for beat for beat. It's one guy's talking, he makes a point, next guy chimes in, oh, a play's breaking out, okay, over to the play-by-play guy, he's going to cover that, and as soon as it's over, we're back to the color analysis as somebody else is chiming in with what these guys need to do next. The amount of practice and coordination and teamwork that the LCS casting squads are able to put together and effectively utilize is incredibly impressive.
And so that sounds like something that you really you appreciate about that. But when you're watching it, and I think we saw this in the comments as well in the responses to your video, there's a lot of that passion and flavor missing, or at least that's the argument. Would you agree with that sentiment, or do you think that there are other opportunities that these procasters have that you think that given the opportunity, you would be able to bring to the table?
I think one thing that a lot of League players are currently disenchanted about isn't the fact that the casters aren't getting excited enough. Because that's what a lot of the arguments, like you just said, the people are saying. They're like, oh man, why aren't the LCS casters getting excited? Look at the games that the LCS casters are casting, right? You're seeing a lot of lane swap play. You're seeing a lot of these early games that aren't about these explosive fights. They aren't about these crazy machinations and just team fights all over the place. Right. And it's because Dragon's not worth a lot. It's because the turrets are easy to kill. It's because the way the game's meta has currently evolved, it doesn't favor super aggressive early play. And that's just the way the game is right now. And you can argue for it, you can argue against it. Obviously, there's arguments for both sides. But the one thing that you've got to look at, and this is something that I've seen myself as a caster, even in amateur games, as a caster, you've got to get excited when the hype presents itself, right? When you have that moment, that big team fight at Baron, that's when you go off, and that's when you can get really, really excited and really, really crazy about it. But at the same time, just as important as being able to do that is being able to make sure that you're not overhyping, right?
Yeah.
Like you've got to make
10
sure
all the time. Yeah.
yeah, you can't be a 10 out of 10 all the time. You got to make sure you're leveling it out. You got to make sure that when you hit that explosive point of excitement, that really is something that the crowd goes, wow, that was something to get excited about, right? And I think that's one thing that people don't fully understand, and something that does take practice and work to be able to do, is you've got to be able to control the levels of excitement, control the reactions appropriately. And that's something that, again, you've got to compliment the LCS casters on their ability to do.
So, looking at esports as a whole, why do you think we've seen such a rapid development in this medium over the last few years? I mean, competitive games have been around for a while, but it seems just in the last 5 years or so, we've really seen an uptick. What are your thoughts on why that is?
It really is cool to see games explode like this, because I was always a nerd growing up, right? Like, I was the little kid who was I was bad at football, and I was bad at basketball, and I was bad at all the normal sports. I played video games, man.
Right, right.
And so as we've gotten older, it's kind of become this thing where video games went from this nerd hobby to there becoming more and more this mainstream stadium filling $1 billion industry type of thing, right?
Hmm.
And it's one of the coolest things to see. And I think one of the reasons for it is the advent of games like League of Legends and Dota 2, and just this general MOBA genre has done a lot for being able to get people excited about things.
Right.
Because, okay, even if you don't understand the intricacies of League of Legends, right? Even if you don't know what most of the characters' abilities do, even if you don't know the items, just the same way that if you're watching a football game, you don't know anything about football. You don't know the plays or penalties or anything like that, or how the different methods of scoring work. You can still watch it if you're watching it with your friends who do know football. And they
Right.
can tell you, we're cheering for Team A. This is the big rivalry between them and Team B. And you can see the exciting plays. You can see the excitement in the crowd and the commentators and the teams themselves when big things happen. And League of Legends has evolved to that point where it's the same way. If I invite my friend over and I tell him, this is TSM versus CLG, we want to see TSM win this one because this is their chance to knock CLG off their throne and come back and take the victory.
Right.
Then even though they don't understand the game,
You're
if
like,
we're
yeah, go
watching
TSM, go Blue
yeah,
Guys, right? Like,
yeah, if we're watching a cast and all of a sudden, Freak loses his mind and there's another quadra kill that happens and it just turns the pace of the game and everybody jumps up out of their seat and they're screaming with excitement, that's relatable. I don't care if you know anything about the game. And I think that ability to have this style of game that's relatable and exciting and fast paced is really doing wonders to draw more and more people in. And I think it helps too that when you look at League of Legends is a free game that doesn't have any crazy computer requirements, right? You don't have to have a $2,000 gaming rig to play League of Legends. It's
right.
very widely
As
accessible.
is painfully aware, when you're in the bronze queue and you've got that you got that
The
teammate who's
toaster
loading
guy.
it up on an Atari, yeah.
Oh yeah, you got to tell the guy to change the bread in his toaster because he
Yeah,
spent 6 minutes loading into the game. Yeah, even the
exactly.
guys that are playing the game on a toaster from 1984, 6 minutes later, they're still loading into the game.
Yeah. And that accessibility, it's funny. We went to Riot recently, and we were able to tour, and we saw the different casting studios, and we went to the arena there, and it's just really amazing, this industry that's come up. I mean, if you were to go back 10 years and say, oh, by the way, there's going to be these video games that bring in $1.5 billion in microtransactions. People would probably just laugh you out of the room, like, oh no,
Nobody would believe you.
nobody would believe you, right? But here we have this whole industry that's spread up around it, and it's just really, it was a sight to see for sure. Now, before we wrap up, where can people hear more of your work? And are there any projects or anything that you would like to plug while you have the opportunity?
Well, if you want to see more of the kind of cast that I'm able to do, you can check me out on both YouTube and Twitch. You can find me on YouTube if you just search Captain Flowers Shoutcast. You'll find a channel that contains different solo shoutcasts that I've uploaded. On YouTube, it's a thing where I can only cast whenever I have the opportunity to just sort of spectate a solo queue game or something like that. So those are games that I cast all by myself. I upload them if I think, hey, that was a really cool cast. I should definitely upload that one and see what people think. So there's some videos on there you can go check out. Or if you want to actually see live casting of actual competitive environment games, full 5v5 teams, the kind of stuff that league casting is made for, not just these solo queue casts that I'm doing on YouTube. You can also check me out, twitch.tv/houseparty5v5. That's the organization that I cast for on a weekly basis. It's an amateur LCS style, so it happens every single week as these teams compete against each other over and over and over again, double round robin, concludes in a playoff, we crown a champion. It's a lot of fun. And that's going to be starting up actually about a week from tomorrow, it's going to be our Swiss Gauntlet, where everything opens up and we're going to see the new teams looking to show their stuff here in this coming season. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And of course, every Friday evening, including tonight, actually, I cast at twitch.tv/EVG tournaments, which is just a single night tournament setup where anybody can show up with their team and compete for prizes.
Awesome. Well, again, Clayton, Captain Flowers, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It was a real honor.
Hey, thank you guys very much for having me.